Infigo have introduced the ability to configure a more granular rule structure around controlling what orders and order line items need to go through the approval process. Historically, approval has always been essentially an on-off switch, where the only fine control was to enable it on a per product basis or to allow some people to bypass it completely. The Approval Workflow Advanced Requirement Rules feature, which we'll talk about today, provides access to a whole new series of rules that you can configure, ranging from approval based on, let's say, order quantities, shipping fees, order totals, and so much more. Please do note that this feature may not be available in your platform by default. Please contact customer support for more information on gaining access to this feature. So the first thing we need to do is navigate to our approval workflow settings. So the same place we'd actually set up our regular approval workflow. Before we move anywhere else, on the General tab, make sure at the very least that your workflow is enabled. This is just the general on-off switch for the approval workflow. Once that's done, go over to the Approval Requirements tab. Now, you won't see that tab if you don't have the functionality enabled. And then you'll see on here we have a range of different options that we're going to control. So firstly, we need to decide, similar to our access permissions functionality, if you want, by default, everything to go through approval, and you're applying exception rules for situations where it shouldn't go through approval. Or it could be the opposite, where nothing goes through approval until you configure a rule that states that it should. Your approach depends on your specific requirements, but in this example, we'll focus on the approach that we want nothing to go through approval unless it matches one of our requirements that we set up. So the first thing we need to do is enable the global exemption setting at the top of the Approval Requirements tab. So make sure, if for this scenario, this one is selected, and then scroll down. Now, what we've essentially got here is just a few different areas that we can add rules for. You can see it covers a wide range of scenarios, and generally speaking, they operate in a very similar way. So if I go on one of the more complex ones, for example, so let's say order subtotal, you'll see that I have settings to do with the threshold. So this is the threshold where you can decide what happens with this rule. And in some scenarios, you'll have find something as well. So for example, in here, it's an order subtotal. You can apply that to a specific customer if you want to do so. You don't have to. You might find that some of them want you to find a category, want you to find a product group or a product tag. And whenever you find one of these, it's just a case of start typing the one you want, and it will filter down a list of available options. Click on that, you'll see that it adds that particular selection above, and then you can go ahead and fill out the rest of the options. Now for the threshold, we're always finding an above value and a below value. So you're basically specifying what happens when you're above a certain value and below another value. And then this is the resulting action of that behavior. So whether approval is required, true, or approval is not required, false. So let's just go through a few of the things that we can do here. You'll see that they are all very, very similar. Starting off with shipping fees. So this rule allows you to specify your upper and lower value threshold for a shipping cost for an order. And when that threshold is met, you decide whether it goes through our approval or not. When this rule is executed, the entire order will then require approval. So for example, I could say that any order above, well, with shipping costs above £50 will require approval. Next down, we have product tag. So this rule allows you to specify a particular product tag, and then you can decide whether products associated with that product tag require or don't require approval. So you just search for the product tag you want to use. say whether you do or don't want approval, and then click Save. Similar process with product group. So basically, you are searching for a product group and then applying a rule to it. And basically, any product that is within that product group will be subject to that particular rule. So approval required or approval not required. Worth noting as well that when this rule is executed, only that order line will require approval. Next, we have order subtotal, the one we were looking at a moment ago. So this is the one where you can assign it to a particular customer if you wish to do so, but you don't have to. So we can start off just with a general threshold. So let's say if my entire order subtotal is above £400, then it requires approval. But you can apply multiple rules to one section. So I could add an additional rule in here, which is for a specific customer. And they could have a slightly different set of rules. And you can see there that two rules have been applied to the same section. When this rule is executed, the entire order will then require approval. Next, we have order quantity. So again, you've got an upper and a lower threshold. This is for an entire order, and it is based on the number of individual items that are included within that order. So basically, if we say, if there's above 250 items in an order, then approval is required. Next, we have an order line total. So this is based on the total value of a single order line. Again, we've got an upper and a lower threshold, and then whether or not that means it requires approval. When this rule is executed, only that single order line will require approval. Next, we have order line quantity. So this is based on the quantity of an individual order line, and it can also be controlled on a per product basis if you want to do so, but again, you do not have to. So again, we've got the ability to specify an above value and a below value, so an upper and a lower threshold limit, and whether or not approval is required. But then you'll see as well that we do have the ability to specify this on a particular product. So let's do two rules for this again, one for non-product specific general applications, and then one for a particular product. There's one. And then when we're searching for a product, it will filter the list again. And then we can apply a threshold to that particular product. Next, we have checkout attribute. So this is based on the value of a checkout attribute that you may have. And it can be controlled on a per checkout attribute basis. So the rule allows you to specify a checkout attribute that you want to check the value of, and then specify a regular expression value that it should be compared against. So you can then specify whether, if the value of that checkout attribute matches the set regex, it should go through the approval or not. And then when this rule is executed, the entire order will then go through for approval. So we can search through our checkout attributes. And then you'd create a regular expression to search for exactly what you want. And then if it matches the regular expression, approval required or not required. And then finally, we have category. So this one's quite simple. If your product within the order line is present within one of these specified categories, then it will be subject to this rule. So for example, if I go and put in a category in here, say that approval is required, if I put an order in where one of several products is in that particular category, then that one order line will then require approval, not the entire order. Okay, and that's done. Now if we go to the top of the screen, remember to hit save on the actual page before you navigate away, just to eliminate the risk of losing those changes.